Well, good evening, you all. I appreciate you all. Most of you stayed this late into the evening, and I may be one of the few U.S. people here, but we usually have dinner around 5, so it's very different over here in Europe. I'm on sabbatical at MME for a year. I've just completed about 11 months. I had the good fortune of working with Thomas Spangenberg, who spoke earlier in the day, and we worked together on the Pathogen box, which we'll talk about, which is about to come out as an open source group of compounds available for the general public. We expect to send out hundreds of them starting in December of this year. But for just a moment, I think somebody earlier said preaching to the choir. I'm preaching to the choir, I'm sure, to tell you briefly what MMV does, but it couldn't be an MMV talk without a little background about MMV. We celebrated in November with lots of champagne, as I recall, Thomas, the 15th anniversary of MMV in being formed by, and yet independent of the WHO, the World Bank, Rockefeller, and Switzerland. And as you all know, it's a very successful product development partnership with a very public health focus. They're partners in over 50 countries. There's a big pipeline of anti-malarial drugs. We talked about it. It's very, very exciting. And there's over 50 projects now on the books that are active from the very early stages of discovery to phase 2 and 3. And what we're excited about is there's already 5 approved products. So this is our pipeline at MMV, which we have a good-sized access team which handles the things on the right there that include the artemisinin combination therapies, which you heard earlier are threatened. There's some very exciting things coming along in terms of saving kids. Getting the rectal artesunate out there is projected to save hundreds and hundreds of thousands of kids' lives over the next 10 years. Having a early treatment before referral is projected to save a lot of lives and get that generally available. We're excited about tafenoquine coming along and is in patient confirmatory trials now. I shouldn't pick out any of these. You've heard Alan talk about the DDU group that at Dundee that has a really exciting preclinical candidate, and we could go on and on and on about what's in the pipeline. But basically, there's about 12 new compounds that are new chemical entities that are either just lined up to go into man or coming through. And MMV is very excited to be in phase 2B trials with single-dose therapy with ozpiperquine and osferoquine. So now back to the open source chemicals, which this is about. The progenitor of the pathogen box was the malaria box, which was a 400 compound active set that was sent out to about 213 labs around the world. They were confirmed blood stage active hits. They weren't, the testing that was requested was very much not limited to the malaria field. This was sent out, as I said, to labs. And the only stipulation was that they don't put it into humans, but that would have been hard with 20 microliters of a DMSO solution, and that they agreed to share the data in the public domain. So to date, as I said, 213 boxes have been shipped to over 30 countries. I'm actually helping put together the data that we can get back into a kind of master overwhelming paper, and there are 59 groups that want to release their data in this paper. There have already been 23 publications from this. What's been exciting is that a ton of the data is from non-malaria applications, including canidoplastids, worms, and a variety of human applications as well. Some of the interesting nuggets that we're pulling out of putting all this together is that when you do an assay over and over and over in different groups, you get quite different results. And in fact, the assays, for instance, on schistosomiasis, there were over 7 screens done, and they form a perfect Venn diagram with only a very few common compounds in the center. Those common compounds actually kill every single organism, including all human cells, so they're not that useful. But the way you run an assay actually gives you a different story about what's a lead, and what's one person's great lead might not be another person's great lead. It's not to say that there isn't validity in each lab for the leads they found, but by integrating all the data together in open source, I think we can really bring a lot home from this. And a lot of the data is available today on Kemble if you just search for the malaria box. So on to the pathogen box. What's that? That is a Gates Foundation funded project at MMV that is to put together 400 compounds having activity against neglected diseases. And I understand malaria and TB don't fall in that, so I should say them separately. And the list of organisms we have compounds for is over there on the right. They'll be distributed free on request. Again, we want the recipients to openly publish the results. And I mentioned the launch date in December of this year. So Thomas helped lead this when he was at MMV along with Paul Willis, and a group of people that have contributed. One thing they did was they went into all of the open source varieties of chemicals that have been reported to have activity against these target diseases and put together a large number of compounds. And then they had an esteemed selection committee come by and review them for their possibility as a good start for a drug development program. And I'll talk about that a bit. A lot of the people in the room have been great partners, Rob Don and DNDI, both from for all their target diseases, the TB drug accelerator, AWOL with the Wolbachia compounds, and so on, have been really helpful. Salvensis is here. They've been very helpful in helping us. And then a variety of labs have contributed leads before this. So I think Thomas helped lead this program where the med chemists reduced the 819 chemotypes that were originally selected into 635 chemotypes. So that's the alpha, and on the right is the beta set, as we call it. And what we've been doing is sourcing and synthesizing that beta set. We have a large number of them done at this point, and they're getting tested, retested on all the disease types, basically mostly completely unpaid, just by the generosity of the neglected disease community. So there were 635 compounds in the pathogen box beta set that I just showed you. Of those now, we've been able to synthesize about half of them are synthesized, about half of them have been purchased at 100 milligram quantities. We've run into brick walls on about 29 or 30 of the compounds that had difficult or very prolonged syntheses. Of the 84 remaining, they should be done within a month or so, and Thomas and the other chemists have been saving the intermediates for sort of an opportunistic approach. And in terms of where we are in finishing them, we've finished all the compounds for lymphatic filariasis, onco, Wolbachia, visceral leishmaniasis, cryptosporidiosis, and you can see down the line, these are color-coded by the organism priorities set by our scientific advisors and the Gates Foundation. Already a large number of those have been sent out to labs. So far, we've had results on 230 compounds, and of those, 140 have been confirmed active. This was actually a bit of a shock to me that there was such a 40% or so, a little bit less, attrition rate. But when I spoke to colleagues at DNDi and so on, they say that they see this quite frequently from literature hits and so on. So just doing that as a mind thought about where we'll be, if we got the full 635, we'd have about 387 actives in the pathogen box, but we're pretty sure we won't be able to acquire 5% of those original ones. So that leaves us a bit short at about 366 active compounds. So for topping up those additional compounds, the community has been very good. As you've seen today, GSK has announced a large treasure trove of both the canidoplastid compounds, TB, and so on, and they have passed those over to us during the publication, and we're working with DNDi to fit those into the box and retest them. We also want to include a number of reference compounds, mostly licensed drugs that are already used for these diseases, so people will have standards within the pathogen box as well. So we're planning to have perhaps as many as a couple of dozen standards in the final pathogen box. So in summary, the pathogen box we anticipate will be ready to be delivered in December 2015. So far, as I mentioned, about 650 compounds and about 88% of the so-called beta set that we got, plus an additional 100 or so compounds of those that we've been able to acquire as top-ups have been going. The biological testing is proceeding. We plan around the time of dispensing these and sending them out to have completed in vitro and in vivo DMPK on all of the compounds. And if you're interested in getting these compounds, or please pass it around to everyone. We're hoping there will be a lot of uptake and people in requesting them. And I have to acknowledge, I've already acknowledged the selection committee led by Simon Campbell, Sir Simon Campbell, the group at MMV led by Paul Willis and Thomas Pangenberg, and the other folks that you see. And then I mentioned the testing labs are giving us basically free labor and materials and so on to test these, to make them available to the open public. So thanks very much for your attention, and back to you.